Welcome, crew. This is the Voices of Titanic podcast, episode 7, and I am your host, Sam. Thank you so much for joining me today. We've talked a lot about death over the last 3 episodes, so I wanted to switch things up a little bit and discuss a survival story this week. I think it's good to add a little balance of hope amongst all the tragedy of that night. There were 63 Finnish people on board the Titanic, and tragically, only 20 survived. Today, we give voice to one of these survivors, Anna Sophia Turja. I'm going to try my best with the Finnish here. As usual with the different languages, you got to bear with me a little bit, please. Anna Sophia was born June 20th, 1893 in Oulainen, Finland, to father Henrik Heikki Johansson Turja and mother Sanna Krita Hohensdotter. Her last name was either Fassi or Hanpa. Oulainen was founded in 1865, not many decades before Anna was born, and received its township rights in 1977. The name comes from a dialectical word, ulu, meaning flooding waters. The town can be found in the northern Ostrobothnia region. It's a small town with a population of only 7,407 in 2019. It covers an area of 597.53 square kilometers, of which 10 kilometers is water. Oulainen has numerous lakes and extensive forests. Its scenery is popular for cycling and hiking. Looking at the images online, if you want to look it up, it appears to be a very beautiful area. In 1912, at the age of 18, Anna was a domestic servant working alongside her mother. She had a half-sister, Maria, who lived in Ashtabula, Ohio, a city with a large Finnish population. Her brother Matt also lived in Ohio in a place called Conneaut. Maria was married to a butcher named John Lundy, who was doing quite well for himself and the family. After Maria made a visit to Anna in Finland, her husband John offered Anna a job at his supermarket in Ohio. Maria sent her around $50 to purchase a third-class ticket aboard the RMS Titanic. Anna purchased ticket number 4138. On the Titanic alien passenger list, it says her port is, in quotes, Hull. So I'm guessing she boarded the SS Polaris, taking the Hango-Copenhagen-Hull route. Most of the Finnish passengers of the Titanic took the Polaris ship. The Polaris was built in 1899 and could carry 247 passengers, which is quite a small ship compared to our Titanic. The Polaris departed Hango on April 3rd, 1912. Once getting to England, the Finnish passengers took the train to Southampton, where she boarded the ship on April 10th. Anna described the Titanic as a beautiful ship, almost like a city. My Google translations could be a little off, but I believe she said everything was so good there that it couldn't be better, and that the main deck was bigger than the main street in her hometown. She shared a cabin with Maria Emilia Panula and her children, Juhanilo, Urho Abraham, and Aino Villajami in the stern of the ship. Her other sons, Ernesti Arvid and Jaakko Arnold, were berthed at the bow of the ship since they were unmarried men. In their cabin was also Maria Panula's neighbor's daughter, Sani Riverori, who was traveling to America to become Maria's family's maid. I would like to add a side note that I've seen a source say that Maria Panula was not, in fact, Anna's roommate, but I'm going to go with what the majority of my sources have said, but keep in mind that it is possible she was actually rooming with someone else. On the night of April 14th, 1912, Anna went to bed and was awoken when the ship, quote, shook and shuddered from the collision. Not knowing what it was, she didn't think anything of it. A crewman pounded on her door yelling out emergency orders, but because Anna didn't speak a word of English, she didn't understand what he was saying. It was one of either Maria's older sons who was in the bow of the ship who came to their cabin to explain the situation, or her roommate's brother. I've seen 2 different accounts, but there was a male who spoke Finnish that was able to translate and explain the danger to them. He told them to dress warmly, get their life belts on, and that they, quote, must get to the deck or else they will die and be at the bottom of the ocean, end quote. Upon arriving on deck, Anna said she immediately knew something big had happened. She remembered there being a lot of chaos and that women were fainting. She said no information was given about the risk of the ship sinking. She felt that if that information were well known, no one would have been saved due to the panic. She recalls having faith that a rescue ship would come, And Anna says she and other Finnish passengers even spent some time listening to music being played, and that she enjoyed the concert so much that she would have gone to the bottom of the sea listening to it. She even said that Finnish people are not known to panic, and that explained some of their calm behavior. Eventually, the crew pushed people out of the room and locked the doors. Anna remembers seeing lights from another ship while out on deck, most likely the Californian, a ship who sadly shut down their wireless operations for the night after going to bed. In a 1962 interview with the Star Beacon, Anna recalled that an older woman in her cabin, presumably Maria Panula, had been her unofficial guardian since Anna was a teenage girl on board the ship. Maria had panicked and tried to persuade Anna to go to a higher deck, because I think that's where the majority of the people were going, so she believed it was safer. A porter told them to follow him to a lower deck, and Anna decided to follow him and went back down to a lower deck area. Maria ultimately refused, and Anna never saw her again. This decision that Anna made saved her life. A crew member grabbed her and shoved her into a lifeboat, possibly number 13 or 15. She said that the ship had sunk so far into the water that her lifeboat was launched right off the deck. She later told her children that she didn't hear the band playing Near My God to Thee, but she also didn't speak English, so it's possible she didn't understand. She said she heard extremely loud sounds, the sounds of pianos, china, furniture, etc., crashing down in the ship. She recalls feeling a reverberation in the water as the boilers exploded. She also remembered seeing the lights of the ship go out. She later told her family how she could hear people screaming and crying, that people who had jumped from the ship were moaning and groaning in the water. 1 minute there would be a scream, and the next minute silence. Her grandson later said that those sounds, quote, never left her heart or her mind. Of all things, she remembered most of the time in the lifeboat. She said she remained in the lifeboat for 7 hours until she boarded the rescue ship Carpathia. Because it was a very dark night, she remembered they would light anything they could, dollar bills, hats, and pieces of paper. Anna said the boat was so full that she could feel the icy cold water when she put her fingers over the edge. When the Carpathia finally arrived, Anna boarded by climbing up on a rope. She recalls that many of the Titanic passengers feared taking off their life belts in case something would happen to this ship as well. When she arrived in America, Anna was taken to St. Vincent's Hospital in New York. The clothes she was wearing the night of the sinking were the only belongings she now had in her possession. After receiving a clean bill of health, Anna was given money and clothes and took a train to Ashtabula. She told family later on that people would approach her on the train once they found out she was on the Titanic, and they would offer her their best, and it greatly overwhelmed her as a young traumatized girl, and she barely spoke any English. She was finally welcomed home by her half-sister Maria and Maria's husband. Anna Turja would never end up working at the grocery store. And the reason why, and I thought this was really adorable, shortly after arriving in Ohio, she met her brother-in-law's brother, Emil Theophilio Lundy, another Finn. It was said that he took one look at Anna and told his brother not to expect her to be a worker for long because he was going to marry her. He proposed to her not long after meeting her. He ended up being the love of her life, and she married him within the year. They were married on April 30th, 1913. 7 years later, in the 1920 census, Anna and Emil Lundy were living at 69 Cherry Street in Ashtabula. Emil worked as a laborer in a shipyard. They had 3 children, Milton, aged 5, Ellen, 3 years old, and Ruth, 1 year old. In 1930, they still lived at the same address and had more children, Ethel, 7, Marvin, 3 years old, and Paul, 10 months old. Emil now worked as a custodian at a public school. Come 1940, the family lived at 1459 West 9th Street. There was now a son named Martin, aged 5, who was their 7th and last child. At age 56 in 1950, they continued to live in the same house. Emil still worked as a janitor, and Anna was now working as a housemaid. Their only child living at home at this time was Martin, who was now 15 years old. According to her family, Anna spent her days with a routine of household duties. Like clockwork every year, she would become still and quiet on April 15th. Each year, she would sit at the head of the table with her hands folded, head down, and tears in her eyes. She would ask Martin and his brother if they remembered what day it was, and they would roll their eyes and say yes, the Titanic anniversary. For little boys their age, it just seemed like a story. Until one day when their mother was invited to attend a showing of the 1953 movie Titanic. Anna left the theater in awe, her son said. A reporter asked her if the movie was realistic. She replied with tears in her eyes, "If they were so close to take those pictures, why didn't someone help us?" Her granddaughter Kay said that this was Anna's first movie and she didn't understand Hollywood movie making. She assumed it would have had a happy ending and people would have been rescued. It caused her to break down in tears. I can't imagine how difficult that must have been for her as somebody who has never seen a movie and also doesn't speak English. You're watching a movie for the first time in a foreign language and not understanding the concept of how movie magic works. And you're reliving this most traumatic moment of your life. And that had to be very confusing and disorienting for her. And my heart breaks for her. Her grandson later recounted that reporters would come to her house every year asking for interviews about her experience. Understandably, it brought back many traumatic memories, but she felt she needed to retell the story to keep the tragedy alive in people's minds. Martin said his mother didn't often speak to family about the disaster, except for some of those interviews with the press here and there. He said there were many parts of her story he wasn't aware of until he wanted to write about the Titanic for a term paper in college. He said, quote, "I knew about the Titanic from about the time I was 5 or 6, but we didn't really talk about it until I called back to Ohio from college to ask a number of questions for my final paper. That was the first time I got to ask my mother about it or took the time to ask my mother about the incident," end quote. After learning his mother's entire story, it made quite an impact on him. Reflecting on her experience with the tragedy, Anna has said, quote, "I thank God for everything. I am a happy lady." Although Anna suffered from dementia in her later years and sadly forgot the names of family members, she was said to have never forgotten her experience on the Titanic. She later moved to Long Beach and died in 1982 at 89 years old. Now, let's talk about Anna's 7 children. Anna and Emil Lundy's firstborn, Milton Henry Lundy, known as Mickey, was born February 9, 1914. His high school yearbook photo shows that he was quite the busy student. He participated in leadership club, theater, basketball, chess, operetta, glee club, chorus, and Latin. At 26, Milton worked as an oiler for Reese Steamship Company. He was later drafted for World War II and was described as having brown hair, blue eyes, standing 5 feet 5 inches tall, and weighed 150 pounds with a light complexion. By the 1950 census, Milton is married to a woman named Hilda from Wisconsin. They live at 924 West 4th Street apartment number 5 in Long Beach, California. Milton has no occupation listed in 1950. I'm not sure why, but his wife Hilda is listed as working as a nurse at a hospital. Milton died at the age of 82 on May 2nd, 1996. He was buried at Green Hills Memorial Park in Rancho Palos Verdes. It appears they had no children. Ellen Margaret Lundy was born August 11, 1916. At 23, she worked as an auditor for a county relief office. The next year, Ellen married Raymond Ray Hardew from Canada on June 14, 1941. In 1950, Ellen and Raymond were living in Pickstown, Charles Mick, South Dakota at James Avenue apartment number 434. Ray worked as a cost accountant for a construction company while Ellen was a homemaker. They had 2 sons, 4-year-old Reynald Paul and 1-year-old Gary. At some point, Ellen also made her way to California too. Raymond died in 1976, and Ellen passed away on December 18, 2001 in Orange County, California. She is buried at Westminster Memorial Park in Orange County, California. Ruth Lundy was born in 1918. At 21, Ruth was living at home with family at West 9th Street and worked as a secretary in what looks like maybe a court office. 2 years later, she married Robert Sheldon, also from Ohio, on April 10, 1942. In 1950, Ruth lived at 235 South Market Street with Robert and their now 3-year-old daughter, Jane. Robert worked at the county courthouse, and Ruth took care of the home. There isn't much information on Ruth, sadly, but she did pass away on April 9th, 1960, at only 42 years old. She is located at Oakdale Cemetery. Ethel Maria Lundy was born July 20th, 1923. She was married on June 27th, 1945 to Lawrence Rudolph from Iowa. 5 years later, the family had moved to California and was living in San Bernardino. They now had 3 children, daughter Kay, 3 years old, daughter Jill, 1 year old, and son James, 2 months old. Ethel was a homemaker and Lawrence was a minister at a Lutheran church. Ethel later worked as a reporter and for the La Mesa Police Department. In 1978 and 1993, Ethel was shown in directories to be living in San Diego and lived there for the rest of her life. She continued to share her mother's stories at schools and in Titanic community groups. She and her husband Lawrence were invited to the Titanic premiere on December 19, 1997. At the premiere, she attended a Q&A with the one and only Don Lynch. She lived a long life and died on March 20th, 2018 at 94. I'll post a picture of her and her husband at the premiere. They're all dressed up and they look super cute together. Marvin Emil Lundy was born August 26, 1926. At 19 years old, on his World War II registration card, it says he is a discharged Navy man. He is described as being 5'8", 150 pounds, blonde hair with blue eyes. He enlisted on June 7, 1944, and was discharged June 6, 1946. He was a third-class signalman. A signalman was someone who set up beach communications stations between ships and the shore. They would typically use a semaphore light, which was easily visible from afar, and would also Morse code to pass messages. A signalman with a telescope would read the ship's semaphore signals and bring that message to another. Ancestry records show that he lived in Los Angeles starting in the 1940s. I was unable to find any documents concerning the rest of his life. I'm not sure if he married or ever had children. Marvin died April 9th, 1975, and was laid to rest at Green Hills Memorial Park, where Brother Milton is also buried. Paul J. Lundy was born May 21st, 1929. I couldn't find a whole lot of information on him. In 1960, he was a gripper at the Union Dock Company and married to Marion V. Rose. They lived at 459 West 9th in Ashtabula. He was in the U.S. Army and fought in the Korean War. Paul passed at the age of 75 on August 12, 2004, after living his life in Ohio. He is at the Edgewood Cemetery. Lastly, Reverend Martin Ernst Lundy was born October 25, 1934. At 15, he was a clerk helper in a grocery store, I'm assuming his father's store. In 1953, 3 years later, he was listed as a laborer. From 1956 to 1960, he served as a personnel specialist in the U.S. Army. He was ordained as a pastor on June 21, 1964, and was a public school teacher before going into the seminary. He served in Walnut and Diamond Bar, California, as well as Tempe, Arizona. He later moved to Naples, Florida, and served there from 1986 to 1999. He then finished out his career in Oregon. He had a wife of 56 years, daughters Ruth, Julie, and Emily, 9 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. He passed away on May 7, 2016 at 81. Anna Turja was incredibly lucky that night. As a third-class immigrant, she followed her instincts and it saved her life. How fortunate she made the quick decision to follow the porter's advice and was lifted into one of the last lifeboats. If it weren't for her decision, she would have never reunited with her family or met her husband Emil. None of these children, grandchildren, or great-grandchildren would exist. It's really mind-boggling to think about how one choice could impact the future of many generations. Anna was considered by her son to be a very spiritual woman. She struggled for years to understand why God would spare her, a poor Finnish girl, and allow rich people to perish. Her son said to her, quote, "Let's look at your 18 grandchildren and 7 children. They are people who are serving society in education, in business, and the church. Maybe that's why." He also replied, "Because he wanted you to live. He wanted you to bring us into the world." She looked at him, smiled, and said, "Yeah, I guess that makes sense." As a result of Anna's survival, she was able to be with family in the United States, to meet the love of her life, and to start a new life, a dream that she had left Finland for. Anna gave birth to 7 children, who then brought 18 grandchildren, 39 great-grandchildren, and 6 great-great-grandchildren into the world. Ethel remembers her mother as someone who genuinely appreciated life and always had a smile on her face. I don't think she ever took her survival of that night for granted. She took full advantage of what life had to give her. I admire her for her bravery and her calm in the face of such a frightening disaster. When you look at pictures of her, and I'll post some of these on the podcast Instagram page, you can see this quiet strength in her young face. She's a really remarkable woman. Let's pause and have a moment of silence for the hundreds of lives that were lost that night, including the other Finnish passengers who did not make it. Let's also pay respect to survivor Anna Turja and what she went through that night. Thank you, crew, for joining me in today's episode. As we disembark, I wish you happiness, love, and peace. Take care, and I'll see you next time on the Voices of Titanic.